a lot of what goes on with housing now is part of it has to do with the economic stability of the person owning the home. If the person economically is able to take care of the home, then the home will be kept up for the most part, right? I mean, may have some people that may neglect, because they're absent-minded or maybe they don't care. Who knows?
Or
But
physically able to do so.
yeah, but
Yeah.
they're more far fewer in between, right? Versus the people who, um, if people actually had a livable wage, if they had, um, if our money didn't go to the corporate parasites and our city was able to actually take care of these things more, then the necessity for HOAs would actually go down. Sabs, you're one of the homeowners on RBN, and you know what it's like to the trials and tribulations of owning a home, because you'll be walking in your house and then you notice something out of place, and then you're like, wait a minute, that wet spot wasn't there before, or that crack wasn't there before. What in the world is going on? Then you got to get on the phone with your spouse and it's like, babe, I found, I don't know, have you seen this? And then next thing you know, it's like, oh man, we got to get this thing taken a look at. Then you got to spend money on a repair guy or a repair person to take a look at it to see if it's something that's going to need to be fixed, and that's more money out of your pocket. So can you kind of go over just a little bit as a homeowner some of the perils you have to face just on that side of being a homeowner?
Yeah, the work is never done. I'm here to alert everybody about that. When you do purchase a home, that's not the end all be all. It's not just about you paying your mortgage and your utilities. There are other things that come with owning a home that you will have to pay for. And so it's one of those things that I tell people, make sure you have a cushion. Like, never say, okay, I'm going to buy a home. I have the money for the down payment and I can pay the mortgage and stuff, and that's it. You got to have money aside when other things happen, and they will happen. Um, and by the way, that's even with new construction. Just because you move into a house that is brand new and no one has lived in that home, that doesn't mean you're not going to have to pay for things going down the road. So,
Mhm.
some of the more common things that you may run into. Um, so there's a water heater in every home. When you live in an apartment and you're renting, this is not something you really have to deal with. That's the landlord's responsibility or the property management's responsibility. But when you own a home, if something happens with the water heater, you have to pay to get that fixed because it impacts so many other things. If you have it, if you have air conditioning, that's another thing. Guess what? It doesn't last forever. So these are things that you kind of have to pay attention to. Like, I know people have already had to replace like AC units. They've had to replace water heaters. We had a basement issue that we had to deal with. There's just always something that you may have to pay for with the house. And it doesn't matter if it's brand new or if it's an old house. Now, you may have
Mhm.
to spend a little bit more in an older home, but with new houses, you have to deal with things too. And then there's things like electrical issues, right? Like, maybe, I don't know, every time you try to use one outlet, you can't use another outlet on the other side of the room. It's things like this that happen that you wouldn't expect to happen.
Mhm.
But you have to be prepared for it, right? So anyway, to
Mm.
make a long story short, when you own a home, it's an investment, but it's a constant investment. It's like you still have to put money into the home. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that when you're renting, and I rented forever, when you're renting, you don't realize those things, because when something there's an issue in your apartment, who do you contact? You either contact your landlord or you contact the property management company, right?
Mhm.
So they take care of those things. If you live in a place where it snows, Same thing. Like, and you're in an apartment, like the city or the landlord, they're responsible for the snow removal around that building. When you own a home, you're responsible. So it's things like that. Someone mentioned mold. That's another thing. Like, and I had that issue in an apartment.
Yeah.
It's not a fun, you do not want to have a mold issue. Let me tell you, that's not a fun thing to deal with. And it's very costly. And landlords will try to get around that because they know how much it costs and they know they're not most likely going to have to go into the walls in order to fix it. And they don't want to pay for it. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll paint over it, or they'll bring in a couple of fans and say, just put these fans on high blast in the room, that type of thing. But when you own a home, if you have a mold issue, guess who has to take care of it? Guess who has to pay for it? You do. So some people that own homes belong to what is called an HOA, a homeowners association. And I did not want to be a part of that. I didn't want to pay into an HOA because I know people that have been doing this, and it has not been a good experience for them. And so I did not want to have to deal with that. Now, it's interesting because there's a guy coming on tonight to talk about how he fought back against the HOA in Atlanta. So this is so funny. But anyway, for homeowners association, you pay a certain amount per month to the HOA, and there are certain services that an HOA is supposed to take care of. That's what you're paying for. But it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah. And another thing a lot of people don't really talk about in regards to having a home is some home builders want to cut corners. And so therefore, when it comes to that inspection, if that inspection is not thorough, then that's a problem down the line that you're going to have to pay for once you buy the home. That's like getting a used car and not taking somebody who knows a lot about cars or a mechanic with you. Now you're on the hook for something that wasn't originally you're on the hook for. So that's a whole nother thing. And I saw a video about this. This gentleman, home was brand new, newly built, and he went with a camera and looked at everything. And he showed so many different things that were wrong in the home, even though it was newly built and unoccupied. And he said, if this doesn't get corrected before the home is purchased, then the homeowners are going to have an issue down the line, a big issue. Like there was things like the toilet would be, kind of rocky on the base. It'll be issues with the electrical systems. It will be big gaps in like doorways, which can also contribute to high heating and cooling costs, things like that. All these different things that come into play. And so a lot of times, these are some of the things that a lot of people don't think about. And you're talking to somebody who's been a renter in his entire life. I've never owned a home. But also, I'm going to talk from the side of being a renter under an HOA. We exist too. We got to talk about that. So let's get into this because I want to go over just basically just the history of HOAs, because this is an article that talks about the history of the HOAs. It says a complete history of HOAs. Very self-explanatory here. And so I'm just going to go over it a little bit. It says homeowners associations are nonprofit organizations that set up help to run, manage, and maintain a community. They've been a vital part of the community management industry for decades and have a history that stretches back into the mid-20th century. Across all those years, HOAs have grown and developed and evolved to become the anchors of the community they are today. Here's everything you need to know about HOA history, including an overview of how homeowners associations began and became what they are now. And so it says in the late 1940s, U.S. veterans returning from fighting in World War II struggled to find affordable housing. Bill Levitt, former veteran himself, recognized the issue and, together with his father, Abraham, and brother Alfred, invested more than 4,000 acres of land on Long Island, New York. Using innovative construction techniques like having specialized teams to concentrate on a specific part of a home and off-site prefabrication, the trio created affordable housing options for veterans, building the community known as Levittown in 1947. While the community didn't have a formal HOA with a board of directors and governing documents, the community established rules and regulations which set the precedent for those we see in today's HOAs. Over time, the Levitt family built an additional communities in similar styles and planned communities across the country were constructed following their blueprint, establishing a foundation for the common living environments of the future. Says how Levittown was built and managed ignited interest in development of planned communities. Soon after Levittown, developers saw opportunity in suburban areas thanks to a Federal Highway Act of 1956, which allowed interstate highways to be built across the United States, which we all know about the interstate highway policy. It also displaced whom?
Yep.
Our black asses. That's exactly what it did.
Yep.
And so, to me, this also feels like a way to establish. Let me put us back on full screen again. This feels like a way to establish for a predominantly white community, number one, rules set in place for that community so that they can't let black folks in. And on top of that, they have to have this uniformity, really, to keep property values up, but keep the riffraff out. And by riffraff, some of them come in certain colors. You catch my drift? And so this is what it looks like to me. And especially, it's like, okay, well, the highway situation, which they've inputted, and that was done in the 50s, that also displaced a lot of black people. But it's like, where they're going to go? Well, they're going to go to the HOAs because HOAs don't want them, right? It says not only were these areas more accessible, but they also included plentiful lots of land and offered exclusive space away from the city. In 1960, the National Association of Housing Cooperatives was founded as an organization supporting the best interests of cooperative housing communities, making way for the first true homeowners associations to begin managing those developments. The NAHC, that sounds almost like the NHIC. Anyway, says offering education and assistance to community leadership groups across the country as they transform into a more established board of directors. And it says in 1948, the case of Shelley versus Kramer, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968 led to anti-discriminatory policies that prohibited the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, or sex. These efforts helped further spearhead the growth and popularity of planned community living, and the types of communities available to prospective homeowners also began to evolve. And so this really is going over the history. And so this one talking about how the FHA approved mortgage exclusivity for condominiums, condos, and homes and subdivisions. And so this is really just a way of keeping the community in a certain framework, but it's supposed to be democratized. Supposed to be. But the question is it? Right?
I was going to say that Levittown had a lot of issues back in the day. A lot of it with housing. They had a lot of issues. Levittown was segregated in a different way. Like they wouldn't allow black people to purchase homes in Levittown. I don't know if everybody knows that, but yeah.
Yeah. And that's really per a lot of homeowners associations too. You know, a lot of homeowners associations, they were like, yeah, we don't want them here. And so they would make sure that they didn't do it. So that's also kind of the beginning of HOAs as well. But with that being said, I want to go to a video that talks about how Florida actually wants to ban HOAs. There's a lot of people that are looking at HOAs and seeing them as Uh-oh. Okay. And so let me go into this video here. Let's get into this right here. And shout out to Roger Meadows for sending me this.
If HOAs, homeowners associations, were outlawed in Florida.
You hate your HOA? Well, Florida lawmakers got a plan to get rid of them. All of them. Yeah, he wants to ban HOAs in the Sunshine State.
Yep, that's the response I thought I would get from most of you, and you're not alone. More and more homeowners who live in HOAs in the state of Florida are getting very upset with them and fed up. And today we're going to talk about some changes that may or may not be coming to the state of Florida and the pros and cons of HOAs.
Florida homeowners say they've had enough. Rising fees, lawsuits, even arrests, all tied to HOAs.
So recent discussions in Florida have seen a proposal floated around by State Representative Juan Carlos Porra to ban HOAs in the state of Florida.
And, you know, it might just be time we take a look if HOAs are really even necessary. You know, maybe we should just do away with homeowner associations as a whole.
And this consideration comes from the backlash of homeowners who are tired of high HOA fees, lawsuits, and over restrictive rules governed and implemented by many homeowners associations. Now,
And part of this is really, I mean, and you can chime in on this if you like, but to me, it's like the over restrictive measures that HOAs have caused in the past were really about keeping certain people out. And those certain people, it was more based especially on like an identity aspect. People who may be either Black or immigrant or LGBTQ or what have you. They didn't want certain people within the neighborhood because they were trying to keep up a certain social setting. Because sometimes it wasn't even about, you know, the type of behaviors that they had. It was just the identity that they had they didn't want. And so that graduated to having certain frameworks of how you kept your lawn, things like that. Like, for instance, I'm gonna give you an example. Why in the world did a lawn of grass become so famous and so is set as a default for what creates a valuable home?
Yeah, I mean it's all about the appearances, right? Like there are certain things that make your I don't know if everyone knows this, but there are certain things that make your property value decrease. And one of them is like the lawn. The other one is or how the lawn is kept. The other one is race, believe it or not. Another one is anything that is considered to be an eyesore. So like if you see a house that has like a car or a couple of cars that are like on center blocks, like that they don't have the wheels, like they're basically like you know what I'm talking about, JB, like the junk cars or whatever, that's considered an eyesore. That can also decrease the property value. There's a number of things, but ultimately that's going to impact people who are lower income.
So would you say that HOAs can also be classist?
Oh, absolutely. Because and that's the other thing, you know, not everybody can afford to pay into an HOA. So let's say you see a house in a community that you really like, but you know, then you come to find out, you start talking to, you know, the seller and come to find out that, oh, wait a minute, this entire cul-de-sac or this entire subdivision is a part of an HOA. So if you don't want to be a part of an HOA, that means that you can't purchase a house in that subdivision. These are like important things for people to know. And it's like, these are things that you find out when you start to pursue the home buying process, because you don't know that up front, right? Like it's just, there's just things that you find out along the way, but it is kind of classist. if you're part of an HOA, for example, the mortgage for the house may be like $2,000 a month, right? But if that neighborhood is a part of an HOA, now your mortgage goes from $2,000 a month to $2,300 a month or $2,500 a month. There are people paying hundreds of dollars a month into these HOAs. So it does make a difference. And I do feel like it is somewhat classist, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thank you very much for that. Let's continue on.
Important to note that as of right now, August 2025, there are no restrictions or bans on HOAs, but there's a lot of people who are saying they're interested in seeing this happen, and they would love to eliminate HOAs completely from their communities.
Miami-Dade County, where it's just a bunch of houses. I mean, the HOA doesn't really maintain anything other than the grass in some areas, and yet you're being charged 500, 600 plus a month, when in reality, you don't see a lot of that money going back to even your own communities.
Hey everybody, I'm Palm Beaches Paul, your local realtor and guide.
And I just want to say,
welcome back.
say something about that. When they say the grass, they're usually talking about the grass that's not your yard. So like if you're looking at this video that JB has right here, the grass that is to that gentleman's left, that looks like that's someone's yard. They don't mow your lawn. But what they will mow is the grass in other areas in that neighborhood that is not someone's lawn.
The common area.
The common areas, right.
Yeah.
So that essentially is what some people are paying for when they belong to a HOA, and that's it. I mean, you still have to mow your own yard. So it, like I said, I just don't feel like it's worth it. Why does everybody in that neighborhood have to pay hundreds of dollars a month for them to maintain the common area lawn? It doesn't cost that. It don't cost that. Listen, the little boys used to come by my parents' house. I remember this. They used to come around the neighborhood during the summer and they would knock on the door and say, "Can I mow your yard for $15?" And my dad used to let them do it because my dad's a big proponent of young people out here trying to, make money the right way. Absolutely. I'm gonna, let them mow the yard. My mom used to like make them a sandwich and give them a little juice box and stuff like that. But these were like young kids. They used to go around like doing that and that type of thing. So if those kids are asking for $15, you know what I'm saying? To mow like the entire, lawn of someone's house, why do you guys need to pay a couple $100 each for the neighborhood common area lawn to be maintained?
Yeah. And so it gets deep. And then on top of that, the history of lawns is kind of interesting. And it's really classist because the history of lawns actually goes to the feudal era, where only the people who were the richest, like the lords and the kings and royalty, they had enough land, so much that they could have just open areas of grass. And it showed the spaciousness of how rich they were. And so now in our country, it's basically supposed to be, well, look how spacious you have. You can be the king of your castle, so to speak. And so this comes from feudal times where your value of your home, it's like the bigger your yard, the more valuable your home is, and if the grass is really nice and well maintained and well kept. But what if somebody doesn't want grass, right? What if somebody wants a garden? What if somebody wants to just plant all wildflowers in their front yard, which would be gorgeous to me, but they would say, no, you can't do that because that's against the HOA rules.
Right. And that's another thing too that comes with HOA membership sometimes is that there's certain rules within that community. I'm glad you brought that up. There's certain rules within that community that, have to be upheld because the HOA says so. And it sounds silly because if you buy a house, you're now a homeowner. You shouldn't be under these similar rules to that you experienced when you lived in an apartment. but some of them are like that. Like every HOA is different. For
Mhm.
some of them, maybe they just maintain the garbage or whatever, or for some of them, it's maintaining the lawn and the common areas. But they don't do, in my opinion, they don't do enough for you to pay them a couple $100s a month. And that's
Mhm.
why I did not want to be a part of an HOA. So if there was
Yeah.
any home, like when I was going through the home buying process, if I heard the words, well, this community is a part of an HOA, nope, not interested by. It's not worth it in the end.
Yeah. In fact, I want to bring attention to this because this is also a really good point. Thank you to Breeze. He said it's unnatural in some parts too. Live in the desert in California and see how futile maintaining a grass lawn is.
Yeah, because it's so dry.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think people, I don't think everyone understands or knows about the rules. Like even parking, some HOAs will have rules around that. They'll try to tell you how many cars you can have parked in your driveway.
Mhm.
It's things like that. Like again, and you're looking at it as though, well, you're a homeowner now, you can do what you want to do because this is your space. But if you're a part of HOA, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. And on top of that, that reminds me of a friend of the family's that we had years ago, and his house was the only house in the entire area that was all rocks and cactus and desert plants. And I tell you, I bet you his water bill was a lot lower than everybody else's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's look, whenever I drive by someone's house and they have a really nice lawn,
Mhm.
just know that that's a lot of money. Especially like to maintain it. Like, yeah, you may have a high water bill because it unless you have sod, you can get like the sod is like the fake grass that's supposed to develop into real grass at some point. But even
Mhm.
then, you have to water that too. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's just and
But
and
even
it's
from,
not for everybody.
yeah, even from an environmental standpoint, you're using up the water for grass that may not be native to that area.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
I know.
yeah.
There's a lot of water. And I think in some places, like maybe like in Southern California, I think they have water usage limits. Like
Yeah.
during certain times of the year, I think you get fined if you go beyond that limit or whatever. But
Mhm.
it is a lot of water that is wasted. Like if you think about the amount of water that people use on their lawns, you
Mhm.
know, and it's just and the hotter the hotter the climate, the more you're probably going to use. Down
Yeah.
south, I'll tell you, like when I lived in the Carolinas, like it wasn't
Mhm.
uncommon for your grass to turn brown
Mhm.
because this is just so hot. It's hot, and not only is it hot, but it's hot for a long time.
Yeah.
So
And it here it's like Florida's very green, but it's humid as hell. And so you have that too. Oof. Yeah. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, corporate parasites. No, never mind. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
and
All right.
unless you have like a garden, right? Like unless you're growing your own food, I think that's a little
Mhm.
bit different. But other than that, you're mainly doing it for appearances.
Yeah. It's just appearance. It's just aesthetics,
Mm.
to make it to make your house more valuable. But why would you want to make your house more valuable if you plan on living in it for the rest of your life?
That's a good point. I mean, well, and I guess that brings the question, right? Do people when they buy, are they planning on staying there for the rest of their life? There's been this movement of, at least this was a couple years ago, it was reported on the local news of baby boomers selling their homes and moving back into the city, like getting like
Mhm.
little condos and stuff, like to be in the city. They're
Mhm.
more so they were the empty nesters. Um, so there was a movement there a couple years ago. I don't think that's happening as much now,
Mhm.
because it's not a buyer's market, at least not up here
Yeah.
right now. But I don't know, that's a really good point. Like if you're not going to sell, why does it matter? But then the other thing is the property value in the neighborhood. Because like I said, this is another thing, and why sometimes some neighbors may complain. if your property looks such a way, it could impact their property value.
Mhm.
It's silly, but it's a thing. This is
Mhm.
also why, well, some of it's racism, but this is why some people don't want a Black person living next to them or a lot of Black people to move into their neighborhood, because they know, and I saw this was on 2020 one time. They were very like upfront about this, because they know that that is going to decrease their property value. Now, that system in itself is racist. And there should be something to dismantle that system. Like, your property value shouldn't be worth the worth of the worth of your property should not be based on your race or the race of the people that live in your neighborhood, but it is.
But value is subjective.
It's true.
And so therefore, because certain people think certain ways about us, about our communities, well, therefore, if they see an accumulation of us in a given area, then they're automatically going to think to themselves, well, this is worth less. So therefore, they're going to value the property even lower based on their perception of what they think about Black people.
And that's
So
regardless
white
of
supremacy literally is also costing our country billions of dollars.
And that's regardless of income.
Regardless of income.
That's regardless of income. This is why when people say, just focus on class, this is why I push back on that. Because when you look at the housing market in particular, especially those who are homeowners, etc., regardless of the class, the property value does decrease based on, the darkness of your skin. And that in itself is a racist system. That's not based on class. That's based on the color of your skin. So I think these are some of the things that people kind of leave out. Also, if you're trying to sell your home and you are Black, your appraisal is usually lower. And they've done studies to show people the difference, where they've taken the Black person out of the home and they staged the home to make it look like it's just a white person that lives there. They took the pictures of the Black person off the walls, etc. All of a sudden, when it's appraised, it goes up. When you add the Black person back in the home, the appraisal goes down. So again, that's not based on class. That was 100% based on race. So this is why, but that goes back to redlining, because when you talk about like more of us come around, and then it gives the impression, well, their property value isn't worth more. That goes back to redlining, because during redlining, that's what that was really about. Regardless of the income, they basically mapped out Black neighborhoods, especially the ones in the urban areas, and said, these are not safe people to lend to. That's what the bank said. That's why when white flight happened, there wasn't a Black flight to go along with it, because the banks would not lend to Black people, who predominantly, most of them came from the red line neighborhoods.
And white flight birthed HOAs.
Right.
So if you guys hate HOAs, blame white supremacy.
Real estate, I'll tell you guys, like, if you haven't gone through it before, but at some point, if you enter the home buying process, you will start to see, and also in renting too, depending on where you live, real estate is very racist.
Yep, absolutely. Shall we continue? This is a good conversation. I like this.
Affect the state of Florida and homeowners. So we're going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, HOAs. Now, today I'm coming to you from a nice little community called Boynton Lakes. I used to live here many, many years ago when my son was little, and this little park right here, spent many Saturdays throwing a football with him here, and even flying a drone one Christmas morning, and then we lost the drone. It was a cheap one, but we found it. Luckily, it didn't land on someone's property, landed in their front yard. But he would come here and we'd bike ride on this walking trail that I'm walking on. And you have all this nice area back here. And then there's a playground in the background. Now, this is a city park that the town of Boynton Beach takes care of. So it's not part of the HOA, but you do have the benefit of it. But the other side of the street, the sidewalks, and the trees, and all that, that is governed by an HOA, and they're responsible for taking care of the sidewalks and the streets and all the entrances to these communities. And for a lot of people, they just assumed that an HOA was a good thing because it used to be fairly reasonable, maybe $100, maybe $200 a month, and they took care of a lot of stuff. But more and more in the news, we're seeing HOAs do things that are illegal, questionable, and sometimes downright just ugly. And people are getting sick of it. And so a lot of people have been complaining and talking to their representatives, and those representatives in the state of Florida are starting to take action. Ron DeSantis, back in July of 2024, passed a new HOA bill.
Now, HB 1203, detailed on the Florida Senate website, will try to ensure HOAs will not be able to misuse their authority. Things like how quickly you have to get your garbage cans out of sight.
So 24 hours before and 24 hours after the garbage truck comes, as long as you've taken them in and during that 48-hour time period, you can't get a violation anymore.
Like taking down holiday and
See?
Christmas lights. The new law.
Go ahead.
See what I was telling you about some of the rules? So
Mhm.
this is important because if you, let's say you go out of town, if you go out of town and you have to put the trash out, let's say your trash day is Friday. So you put out the trash. A lot of times people leave on Friday to go out of town. You put out the trash, you're going out of town. Who is going to take your trash can back up to your house? And if they don't, then you're going to get fined.
Mhm.
Why are you being fined for that? So that's just one of those rules. I also want to know, in that video where that guy was walking, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was a tennis court there. Okay. So in some of these communities, like especially like in Florida, where it's usually warm, like most of the year, or hot most of the year, they have like tennis courts, they have like a community pool, that type of thing. I'm talking about people who are part of HOAs where there's none of that. None of that. No tennis court, no pool, no. You just basically paying for them to mow the grass next to the sidewalk that is not your lawn. But it looked like that community had more amenities because I see the tennis court over there.
Yeah. So yeah, this gentleman had they have a tennis court right here. Boom. Right over there. And a lot of places they'll have tennis courts, they'll have a community pool as well. And these HOAs, a lot of them also pay for, if they're a gated community, they have to pay for not just the gate, but also the guard at the gate and for the gate to be maintained.
Yes.
So that is also part of the HOA fees that also are associated with it. Unfortunately, the HOAs, they've gotten ridiculous. And I can speak from experience that the HOA in the condos that I lived in, they were charging $300 a month to the homeowners. And as a renter of a homeowner with an HOA, that also affected my rent. But here's the interesting part. The HOA actually owned my condo. So they were my landlord. My landlord was the HOA. So they collectively owned my place. And so remember that time when I had to fundraise because they raised my rent like $250 in one year? That was them. That was them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was on top of that. And then on top of it, and this is the difference between HOAs with single family homes versus HOAs with condos. With condos, since they're kind of built almost like apartments, the upkeep of the buildings, especially when it comes to things like the roof and things like that, falls on the HOA. And so one of the things that they did, which was idiotic to me, but they're trying to do it for property value reasons, was one year they decided, oh, we're going to paint the buildings. We're going to paint it like a rust red and pea soup green. No kidding. They decided to paint and neglect the more important thing, like the roof. And then Florida actually passed a law, an ordinance. I think it was either Florida or it was Orange County, but it passed a law basically saying if your roof is not up to code and it has not been newly refurbished within, I think, a certain time frame, if it hasn't been refurbished since this particular year, then you're going to face heavy fines. And so they had to rush to get a crew to replace the roof. And by the way, the condo that I lived in was owned outright. Like, it was paid off. So all the rent that we were paying were going straight to the association. Outside of taxes, pure profit that they were getting.
That's
and so
crazy.
all the profit that they gotten, and I calculated it over the entire year. I'm like, they were probably making a good $10,000-$20,000 just in pure profit if you minus the taxes from us from it all. And I'm like, okay, so you have that just our apartment plus the other rentals in the area. Then it's like, okay, well, you guys could have gotten that. And over the years, you guys could have gotten that roof fixed. You guys could have gotten that done already, but you decided not to. And then there's some discrepancies about how the money was being spent by the HOA too, because it seems like things were being used for personal reasons, not for association reasons. So things were just like out of whack. And then on top of that, the harassing us about, the grass being too high, even though it was behind a stone wall. It was just crazy. So the HOA, from a renter's perspective, is like having a secondary landlord. It's almost like you have a landlord and you have another landlord.
Right. Basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not what I think a lot of people think it is. Like, I just don't think it's worth the money. I think it can be a hassle, especially with some of the rules that they have. I don't know, man. I just feel like it's a waste. It's a waste. It is, and that's the other thing, because I don't know. Are we going to get into the property taxes thing as well?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, I'll save that then.
Yeah. But yeah, so as far as HOAs, and this is a really good video to take a look at. He answers a lot of questions. He's actually a realtor, and he gets into all that as well. But the video is literally over 20 minutes long. But there are a lot of different issues in regards to HOAs, but he also goes over the pros and cons. And some of the pros of an HOA are kind of interesting, because the pros of an HOA are, property values still remain at a good level. I'm of the opinion where I kind of reflect on what Mal said. Houses are for living in, not speculation. But, and so it's, but at the same time, without HOAs, you have a whole lot more freedom.
Right. I mean, some of those rules, man, that's why I'm like, and it may not be something that bothers you at that time, because I've had friends that have been a part of the HOA, but then later on they have a problem with it, and they're like, wait a minute, all these rules are ridiculous, like, so just because you like it, just because you like the house or the condo, doesn't necessarily mean you should just go for it because you like it. I guarantee you on this, you will see something else that you like. But I caution people about the HOA process.
Yeah. And as far as the HOA process, one of the things that it does do is, like, for instance, HOAs also are in regards to when it comes to the common areas, right? The roads, the sidewalks, things like that. they're more, upkept, right? Versus if you have to depend on the city to do it, then it's going to take longer to take care of. It's not going to get taken care of, as quickly, and it may not be exactly to the liking of, the people in the area. So there's different things like that. So that's a whole nother point too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, to me, the disadvantages outweigh the benefits in many ways. But I mean, if
I
we
think
really,
so too.
I think that I don't know, what's the solution in my mind is, first of all, a lot of what goes on with housing now is part of it has to do with the economic stability of the person owning the home. If the person economically is able to take care of the home, then the home will be kept up for the most part, right? I mean, you may have some people that may neglect, because they're absent-minded or maybe they don't care. Who knows?
Or physically able to do so.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they're far fewer in between, right? Versus the people who, if people actually had a livable wage, if they had, if our money didn't go to the corporate parasites and our city was able to actually take care of these things more, then the necessity for HOAs would actually go down.
Yeah. I mean, I think, also about like elderly people that live alone
Mm-hmm.
who just can't physically, they may not be able to get out there and shovel every time it snows right away, or cut the grass,
Mm-hmm.
and that's another thing. And it's like they're not at the point where they're not to a point where they would have to be in a nursing home. They can take care of themselves, but
Yeah.
it may be physically demanding for them to do some things outside of the house. But that's where community comes in, right? That's where people in the neighborhood should offer to help.